The Graham family's house stood like an island in the dense woods of Utah, its silhouette darkened against the forest's suffocating embrace. Annie Graham, an artist who sculpted haunting dioramas, had just buried her mother, Ellen. The death left a complicated void. Ellen had been an oppressive matriarch, veiled in secrecy and power. Annie, despite the years of bitterness between them, felt something deeper than grief, an unsettling dread. The funeral was intimate but cold. Annie's eulogy was terse, hinting at a relationship fraught with manipulation. Among the mourners was a sea of unfamiliar faces. Frail old women exchanged cryptic glances, their whispers drowned by the soft organ music. One clasped Annie's hand a moment too long, her eyes filled with something akin to pity or triumph. Annie's teenage son, Peter, seemed detached, lost in his headphones. Her youngest child, Charlie, however, was a stark contrast. Eccentric and unnerving, Charlie carried herself as though Ellen's death had unleashed something within her. She began sketching grotesque figures in her notebook and building strange totems from scavenged bones and bits of wood. Charlie's behavior didn't escape Annie's notice, but she dismissed it as grief. After all, hadn't her own childhood been marked by Ellen's strange rituals and oppressive love? Still, when Charlie muttered about Grandma's friends watching her, Annie couldn't shake her unease. The unraveling began on a humid spring night. Peter was reluctantly tasked with taking Charlie to a high school party. She clung to a chocolate bar, nibbling nervously, as Peter promised her it wouldn't be long. At the party, she wandered off, snacking absent-mindedly until her throat tightened. "Peter," she gasped, clawing at her neck. A deadly allergic reaction had begun to constrict her breathing. Panicking, Peter rushed her to the car, speeding down dark, winding roads. Charlie's gasps turned into guttural shrieks as she stuck her head out the window for air. Then it happened. Peter swerved to avoid a dead animal, and Charlie's head struck a telephone pole. The sound, a sickening, final thud, echoed in Peter's ears. He froze, too terrified to look back. Trembling, he drove home, parked the car, and crept to bed, leaving Annie to discover the gruesome aftermath in the morning. Grief consumed the Grahams. Annie spiraled into despair, her dioramas taking on a grotesque new edge as she recreated Charlie's death in meticulous detail. Steve, her stoic husband, tried to keep the family together, but the cracks in their foundation widened. Peter bore the brunt of Annie's rage, her accusatory stares burned into him, unspoken but palpable. Annie sought solace in a grief support group, where she met Joan, a warm, empathetic woman who seemed to understand her pain. Joan shared a story about losing her own grandson and suggested that Annie try a spiritual ritual to contact Charlie. Desperate for closure, Annie agreed. Late one night, Annie gathered her family around a table. A candle flickered as she called out to Charlie, her voice trembling. At first, nothing happened, and Peter scoffed, shifting uneasily in his chair. Then the candle flame roared upward, and the air grew heavy with an unnatural chill. "Mom?" Peter whispered, his voice cracking. The glass on the table began to move on its own, spelling out a message, "MOM." Peter screamed, and Steve tried to end the seance, but Annie was entranced, tears streaming down her face. It was Charlie, or so she believed. In the following days, inexplicable events plagued the household. Doors slammed on their own. Shadows moved where no one stood. Annie's sleep was haunted by visions of Ellen performing dark rituals. Charlie's sketchbook began filling itself with drawings, gruesome, angry depictions of Peter. Annie delved into her mother's belongings, piecing together the fragments of Ellen's secret life. She found books on demonology and photographs of Ellen with Joan and other cult-like figures. At the center of it all was a figure named Paimon, a demon who demanded a male host to wield his power. Annie's blood ran cold when she realized the ritual wasn't over. Her family was still in danger. Confronting Joan, Annie begged for answers, but Joan's demeanor had shifted. Her warmth was gone, replaced by an eerie calm. "It's all for the best," Joan murmured. "Charlie was never meant to be in that body. Peter is the one." Horrified, Annie fled, only to find her home had become a living nightmare. Peter was plagued by visions of his decapitated sister, her voice calling to him. Steve dismissed it all as hysteria until he, too, became a victim of the house's growing malevolence. One fateful night, the Grahams' tenuous grip on reality shattered. Annie, possessed by a malevolent force, chased Peter through the house. He stumbled upon Ellen's headless corpse in the attic, surrounded by a ring of chanting figures. The truth was undeniable: the cult had orchestrated everything: Ellen's death, Charlie's accident, and now, Peter's doom. Peter leaped from the attic window, his body crashing onto the ground below. For a moment, all was silent. Then, a faint shimmer of light descended upon him. His body stirred, but it was no longer Peter who rose. Inside the house, the cult gathered, crowning Peter as Paimon's new vessel. Annie's lifeless body knelt among them, a silent testament to the horrifying legacy that had claimed the Graham family. The Graham household lay in eerie silence, a monument to the horrors within. In the woods, a new chapter began. Paimon, now fully embodied, surveyed his kingdom through Peter's vacant eyes. The cult knelt in reverence, their chant filling the air with dark promise. The cycle was complete. The inheritance had been passed. The nightmare had just begun.